Hey guys, Technomentary with a video for you guys. In today's video, we're comparing the iPhone XS Max with the iPhone SE first edition head-to-head comparison video. We're going to take a look at everything that you need to know in terms of hardware, the software, overall build and performance of these two phones in 2021. We're going to discuss all of that and more. But before we go ahead and get started, if you guys are new to our channel, we do a lot of tech news, reviews, and giveaways. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you guys are in the market to buy either of these two phones or in the newer iPhones at a discounted price, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with today's video. Between these two phones, a lot has changed, and the first thing we want to talk about is the release date of these two phones. The iPhone SE first edition was released in March of 2016, and then 2 years later, during the Apple annual flagship release date around September of 2018, the iPhone XS Max was released, and a lot has changed between these two phones. Although they are 2 years apart, and in 2021 both of these two phones are relevant to a degree, and we want to talk about the relevancy of these two phones and compare them. As you can see here, huge difference in terms of the size of these two phones. The SE here looks tiny compared to the Max of it. That's because the SE here is probably one of the smallest phones out there. It's similar to the iPhone 5 and the 5S lineup because of that body and build to it. The SE here does not have a Max or the plus size of it, so hence why it's not really a comparison for apples to apples in this case, but it is a comparison, and we're going to be comparing it. You'll notice things like the iPhone XS Max here has both front and back being glass that allows it to do wireless charging, while the iPhone SE here does not have back, as the glass is just a regular metal aluminum body to it. Of course, the build of these two phones are different because of that. You have the build of these two phones. You'll notice other things like the body edge rounded versus that flat edge to it. And surprisingly, Apple with the 12 lineup is actually going back to this design where the flat more defined on the 12 lineup body, which surprises us because with the 6 lineup, Apple started to go rounded bezel, and now they're moving back to the older design. So in design wise, not sure why Apple is going backwards instead of forwards. Other thing you'll notice, of course, things like the camera here, where you have that camera sticking out of it. If you notice slightly closely, this 12 megapixel camera, dual 12 megapixel camera compared to that single 12 megapixel camera. That's noticeable of these two phones. Other things, of course, you notice here, Apple gone away with writing all this extra stuff on the bottom. It just has the word iPhone. Of course, you'll notice the iPhone logo itself being more shinier versus more matte design on the SE here. Enough with talking about the body. Let's talk about the actual phone itself. Let's talk about the display of these two phones. Of course, a lot of change there as well, because you can see the display itself when you're just holding it side by side is that massive difference in terms of size. You have the Max edition here, which has a 6.5 all-screen OLED display. That's super retina display compared to that 4-inch LCD display. Nowhere does that really make any comparison. You have this tiny screen that's just LCD with IPS technology with that OLED, and that's probably the reason why the iPhone XS Max here, when it came out, was started at almost $1,100 at the base 64 gig model. Talking about the model of these two phones in the storage capacity, if you're looking to buy a phone with a lot of capacity, the iPhone SE here starts at 16 gig and is able to go up to 128 gig compared to the XS, which if you're looking to max out your storage, you're able to get it at 512 gig, which is huge compared to this one. So if you're looking for a phone with bigger storage, because storage is internally built, you're probably going to be looking at the iPhone XS here. Looking about the other thing we want to talk about, the display of these two phones, is that the iPhone XS here, because of that OLED, it has one of the bigger resolutions we've seen on the iPhones. It has that HDR display of 2688 by 1242 pixel at 458 ppi compared to the first generation of the SE, which has a mere 1136 by 640 pixel at 326 ppi. Things like True Tone display and 3D touch that are available on the XS Max here is not available on the first generation of the iPhone SE of course, that's one thing you'll probably notice between in these two phones. Of course, in the display, you're really not comparing much here. Of course, the XS is superior in a lot of ways in display. Let's talk about the camera build of both of these two phones. This is another area we want to talk about between these two phones, is the camera, because a lot has changed in the camera space of these two phones. First thing is that the iPhone first edition here does not have things like portrait mode available. So if you're looking to enhance your photography skill, to use all of these extra features of the photography mode, you're probably going to look at the iPhone XS here. Max. Things like video, because of that dual camera that you have, you're able to do optical zoom. That's not possible on the iPhone SE here. Of course, both of the phones does record 4K. The iPhone first edition SE is able to only record at 4K at 30 frames per second, where on the iPhone XS Max you're able to go from 24 frames per second to 30 and all the way up to 60 frames per second. So superior camera overall built. So if you're a photographer or looking for an updated camera and looking to do what the newer lineup of phones can do, the iPhone XS Max is your go-to phone. So let's talk about the battery of these two phones. This is one area that you probably want to talk about. So as you can see here, between these two phones, the battery is almost a huge difference. The iPhone first edition of the SE here has around 1600 mAh compared to the iPhone XS Max here, which has a huge battery. It has a 3200 mAh battery because it needs that battery for that OLED display that it has. And the reason why Apple had to put in a bigger battery is because its 6.5 OLED display consumes up a lot of battery. And between these two phones, one thing you want to probably compare is in terms of video playback. That's really important to compare video playback. And the reason why you want to compare video playback between these two phones is that really tests the battery of these two phones. When we did video playback, the iPhone XS Max gives you around 15 hours of video playback, but it's phenomenal because of that bigger display. It gives you almost like you're watching it on a tablet. Compared to the iPhone SE here, which gives you around 13 hours of video playback. Doesn't seem a lot, but it's only 2-hour difference for a phone that almost have 1600 mAh bigger battery. So that you can see that OLED does definitely consume up a lot of its battery, and that's probably one thing you'll notice between these two phones. Other thing to talk about between these two phones is the chip on these two phones. The iPhone SE here has an A9 chip versus 3 generations later you have the A12 Bionic chip, and that's things like if you're doing gaming on it, it's going to be probably where you notice if you're doing multitasking or playing games that are meant to be played on the console like Fortnite and PUBG, things like that, you're going to probably max that out. Of course, between these two phones, if you're using it for social media and such, because both of these phones are supported on iOS 14, all of those apps are going to be fully functional, no doubt about it. Talking about software is that the iPhone SE here, first generation, it's going to be pretty much hitting the end of life when iOS 15 comes out, because iOS 15 is not going to be supported anymore. So if you're looking for a phone to use on the long term, you're probably not going to be looking at the first generation of the SE here. On the other hand, the iPhone XS Max here, it's going to get at least another 2 to 3 years of major updates. We're probably going to be seeing iOS 15, 16, and possibly 17 on the Max version of the iPhone XS here, and that's why you're probably going to be looking at it. Nonetheless, right now, in the beginning years, in the later half, of course, we're going to notice that between these two phones, if you're using it for social media or entertainment purposes, of course, if you're looking to do a lot of more video streaming, you're probably going to be looking at the Max edition of it because of that huge display. It almost gives a more vibrant experience, of course. Nonetheless, if you're looking for a phone that's really tiny, small, and still can do 4K stuff, probably the iPhone SE gets the job done, but not as well as the iPhone XS Max here. So let's talk about why might you get one phone versus the other. Why might you get the iPhone SE first edition? Well, a couple reasons you might still get the iPhone SE first edition. It's really light. It has fingerprint reader because the all body display. You don't have fingerprint reader, where Apple is rumored to bring that back in, because in 2021, as you know, fingerprint reader is really key in terms of Face ID doesn't seem to work when you have something covering your face. So that's probably one reason. It's 95% lighter, thicker, it's thinner, and it has that body design of the iPhone 12 lineup. And lastly, budget. If you're really tight on money, don't have that much to spend, and looking for a phone that's still supported on iOS 14 and it gets that latest iOS 14 update, and looking to spend like less than $100, iPhone SE would be your phone. It's a great beginner phone, and someone looking to who still use some of the features of the iPhone here probably, and to do a lot of your basic apps that are supported on it, texting, FaceTime, iMessage. The iPhone SE gets that job done at almost a fraction of the cost you would pay for the XS Max. And why would you get the iPhone XS Max? Well, there's a lot of reasons and a lot of features that come with the iPhone XS Max. You have almost 2 times the more battery power than the iPhone SE here. You get almost 40% higher pixel density to it. It has almost 3.5 faster CPU speed when we did some speed comparison. Also, the RAM between these two phones. The iPhone SE has a 2 gig RAM versus 4 gig of RAM that's onboarded on the iPhone XS Max. So speed, resolution, display, camera, all of that and much more, and the feature that goes with the iPhone XS. Now, to say that the iPhone SE isn't still a good phone, it's just that it just can't compete with all of that feature that you get. And hence why the starting price, as you know, between these two phones were vastly different. You have a phone that's almost half the cost versus almost $1,100 to $1,200 phone that you're getting on the iPhone XS Max. But in 2021, this phone, you can pretty much score it using the link in the description section for around $400 to $500. And hence why we would say, for a phone to get the most out of your money, you're going to be looking at the XS Max in 2021. So hopefully this video is helpful if you guys are looking to do a comparison. We want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about both of these two phones in 2021? Leave a comment in the comment section whether you upgraded from to another, or if you used either of these phones in the past, leave a comment in the comment section. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.